Thomas Bennett woke before dawn as he always did. The artificial lights of Station Kepler 9 hummed to life on their program schedule, casting pale blue across his small quarters. He pulled on his work clothes and headed to the community garden section where he kept his plot. It was the only piece of earth he had this far out on the frontier. The walk took him through empty corridors. Most residents were still sleeping. Thomas liked these quiet hours. They reminded him of mornings back on his family farm in Oregon, before he decided to try his luck among the stars. He had been on Kepler 9 for 3 years now, working as a maintenance engineer. The garden was just a hobby, something to keep his hands busy and his mind calm. When he reached the garden dome, something felt wrong. The door was already open. Thomas always locked it behind him. His heart rate picked up as he stepped inside. The rows of tomatoes, beans, and lettuce stretched before him in neat lines. Everything looked normal at first glance. Then he saw the footprints. Muddy tracks led from the entrance to his vegetable beds and back out again. Several of his best tomato plants had been stripped of their fruit. Half his bean plants were missing pods. Someone had taken a lot of food. Thomas followed the tracks. They were smaller than human feet, with an odd three-toed pattern he recognized. VRYNN. The station had taken in about 200 VRYNN refugees 8 months ago, after their home colonies were destroyed in some corporate war. Thomas had seen them around but never spoke to any. They kept to themselves mostly, living in the old cargo sections on the station's edge. The tracks led him through service corridors he rarely used. The walls here were stained and poorly lit. This part of the station had been scheduled for renovation years ago, but the funding never came. Now it housed families who had nowhere else to go. He found her crouched beside a ventilation unit, trying to hide. Her skin was pale blue, almost gray, and it flickered with dim bioluminescence. VRYNN skin usually glowed brighter than that. Thomas had seen pictures. This woman looked sick. She clutched a torn plastic bag to her chest. Thomas could see his vegetables inside. Tomatoes, beans, 3 heads of lettuce. Her large eyes went wide when she saw him. She started to run. "Wait," Thomas said. He held up his hands. "Please wait." She stopped but looked ready to bolt. Her whole body was shaking. Up close, Thomas could see how thin she was. Her clothes hung loose on her frame. The bioluminescent patterns on her arms pulsed irregularly, like a failing light. "I am sorry," she said in heavily accented English. Her voice was rough, desperate. "I'm so sorry. Please do not report me. Please." "I just want to talk," Thomas said. He kept his voice calm and low. "What is your name?" "Lira." She looked down at the bag in her hands. "I know this is wrong. I know. But my children, they have not eaten protein in 6 days. 6 days. The distribution center, they say we are not priority. They say we must wait." Thomas felt something twist in his chest. 6 days? How is that possible? The station has plenty of food. Lyra's eyes filled with tears. They were larger than human tears, more viscous. They clung to her face like drops of mercury. "The food they give us, it is not right for VRYNN bodies. We need specific things. Amino acids. Your earth vegetables have them. The synthetic rations they give us do not. We can eat them but we get no nutrition. We stay hungry even with full bellies." She was crying openly now. Her whole body shook with sobs. "My youngest, Pyrie, she is only 4 cycles old. She is so weak now. She does not play anymore. Just lies down. My son Jack, he is 7. He tries to be brave but I see him getting thinner. And Kessa, my oldest, she is 15. She gives her rations to her siblings. She thinks I do not notice." Thomas had heard about bureaucratic problems with the refugee situation, but he had not paid much attention. He had his own problems, his own life. Now he was standing in a dark corridor watching a mother break down because she could not feed her children. "The distribution system," Lira continued, wiping at her face. "They have us classified wrong. Our dietary needs are listed as preferences. Like we choose to be difficult. But it is biology. Without the right nutrients we slowly starve." I tried to explain. I filled out forms. I spoke to supervisors. They say they will look into it. That was 3 months ago. She held out the bag toward Thomas. Her hands trembled. "You can take it back. You can report me. I understand. I could not watch them waste away. I could not do nothing." Thomas looked at the bag of vegetables. Then he looked at Lyra's desperate face. He thought about 3 children he had never met, lying weak and hungry in some converted cargo bay. He thought about the crates of fresh produce waiting to be harvested in his garden. More than he could ever eat himself. He made a decision. "Keep it," he said. Lira stared at him. What? Keep the vegetables. For your children. Thomas reached out slowly and pushed the bag back toward her. And come with me. I have more. I do not understand. My garden has plenty. I grow more than I need anyway. Thomas started walking back the way he came. Come on. We need to get you more food before the morning shift starts. Lira followed him hesitantly, like she expected a trap. They walked in silence back to the garden dome. The lights were brighter now as the station woke up. Thomas moved quickly, gathering produce into a larger bag. Tomatoes, beans, lettuce, carrots, some leafy greens. He added protein-rich nuts from his small storage locker. This should last a few days, he said, handing her the full bag. But that's not a solution. We need to fix the real problem. Lira took the bag with shaking hands. She looked at Thomas like he had just performed a miracle. Why are you helping me? You do not know me. Thomas thought about that. Back on Earth, my family almost lost our farm during the drought years. Our neighbors, people we barely knew, they helped us. Brought us food. Helped with repairs. My father used to say that's what humans do. We look out for each other when things get hard. He paused. I guess I think that should apply to everyone, not just humans. Fresh tears rolled down Lyra's face, but she was smiling now. Thank you. Thank you so much. I will pay you back. Somehow I will. We can worry about that later. Thomas pulled out his data pad. Right now, I need you to tell me everything about this distribution center problem. Names, dates, who you talked to. If there are 47 families going through this, we need to make noise. Loud noise. Lira nodded eagerly. For the first time since he found her, hope flickered in her eyes along with the bioluminescence in her skin. Thomas Bennett had come to the frontier to escape complications. To live a simple life. But standing in his garden with a bag of vegetables that might save 3 children, he realized some complications were worth embracing. Thomas spent the next 2 days digging through station records. He sat in his quarters with his data pad, scrolling through file after file of bureaucratic documentation. What he found made his blood boil. The VRNN refugees had been processed through the standard intake system when they arrived 8 months ago. Someone in the Colonial Administration Office had filled out their dietary requirements form. Under the section marked Special Nutritional Needs, they had checked a box labeled Cultural Preference instead of Biological Requirement. One wrong checkbox. That single mistake had condemned 200 people to slow starvation. Thomas found the request forms Lira had mentioned. Dozens of them. All marked as pending review with no action date assigned. He found medical reports from the station clinic documenting malnutrition cases among VRNN children. Those reports had been filed but never forwarded to anyone who could actually help. The system was not deliberately cruel. It was worse than that. It was indifferent. On the 3rd day, Thomas went to visit Lyra's shelter. She had given him the location reluctantly, embarrassed about where her family lived. The old cargo bay was in Section 7, a part of the station most residents never saw. The corridors smelled of recycled air and mildew. Pipes dripped condensation onto the floor. The bay itself had been divided into small living spaces using salvaged wall panels and hanging sheets. No privacy, no proper facilities. Just families crammed together in whatever space they could claim. Thomas counted at least 20 makeshift homes in this one bay alone. The lighting was dim, probably to save power. Children sat on the floor, listless and quiet. That bothered Thomas most. Children should be loud and running around. Lira met him at the entrance. She looked better than when he first found her. Her skin had some color back, and the bioluminescent patterns glowed a bit brighter. You came, she said, surprised. I said I would. Thomas held up the bag he brought. More vegetables from his garden. Where are your kids? Lira led him to her family's corner. It was barely 3 meters square. Sleeping mats on the floor, a small storage crate for their belongings, a single overhead light. This was where 4 people lived. 3 children sat on the mats. The youngest, Pyrie, was curled up asleep. She looked terribly small and fragile. Her skin was almost translucent, showing the network of veins underneath. The boy, Jack, watched Thomas with wide, cautious eyes. He held a broken data pad, probably a toy from before the war. The oldest daughter, Kessa, stood up when Thomas entered. She was tall for a VRN, almost matching Thomas's height. Her skin showed more pattern than her mother's, swirls of deeper blue that marked her as a teenager. Despite her obvious hunger, she positioned herself protectively between Thomas and her siblings. It is okay, Kessa, Lira said gently. This is Thomas. He is the one who gave us the food. Kessa's posture relaxed slightly. Thank you, she said in careful English. My brother and sister, they are much better now. Pyrie even played yesterday for the first time in weeks. Thomas set the bag down. I am glad to hear that. He looked around the cramped space. Lira, can we talk? About the situation here? They sat on the floor while the children unpacked the vegetables. Thomas watched Jack's face light up when he found the tomatoes. Such a simple thing to make a child smile. It should not be this hard. Tell me about VRNN biology, Thomas said. I need to understand exactly what nutrients you need. Lira explained as best she could. VRNN had evolved on high-gravity worlds with mineral-rich soil. Their bodies required specific amino acid chains that their home planet's plants produced naturally. Earth vegetables, by coincidence, produced similar compounds. Not identical but close enough that VRYNN digestive systems could process them. The synthetic rations the distribution center gives us, Lira said, they are designed for human nutrition. They fill our stomachs but give us nothing our bodies can use. It is like eating cardboard. Kessa joined the conversation. She was smart, Thomas realized. Observant. Before the war, I studied agriculture on our colony world. I helped in the growth domes. I know which earth plants would be best for us. She ticked them off on her fingers. Legumes for protein chains. Leafy greens for mineral absorption. Root vegetables for complex carbohydrates that our systems can break down properly. You know farming? Thomas asked. I was learning. Before. Kessa's bioluminescence dimmed. Before everything burned. Thomas felt a plan forming in his mind. How many VRYNN families are in this section? 14 in this bay, Lira said. 33 more in the bays beyond. 47 families total. About 210 people. The numbers were staggering. Thomas did quick math in his head. His garden plot could feed maybe 10 people comfortably. 20 if he pushed it. 200 was impossible. Over the next week, Thomas brought food every other day. He woke early, harvested before dawn, and made the trip to Section 7 before his work shift. He met other VRYNN families. Learned their names. Saw more children with that same terrible listlessness that came from chronic hunger. He also started asking around the station. Quietly, carefully. He talked to other gardeners in the community plots. Most were sympathetic when he explained the situation, though a few were not. There was tension on the station about the refugees. Some residents felt the VRYNN were taking resources. Others just did not want to get involved in complicated problems. Thomas recruited 3 other gardeners willing to help. Sarah Price, who grew herbs and medicinal plants. Gregory Walsh, who had a large plot dedicated to root vegetables. Anita Flores, whose specialty was protein-rich legumes. Together they could maybe feed 50 VRYNN. Still not enough. He also discovered that he was not the first to try helping. A human aid worker named Carol Hayes had been fighting the bureaucracy for months. She worked in the station medical center and had been treating malnourished VRYNN children. She had filed report after report with the administration, all ignored. Thomas met her in the medical center cafeteria. Carol was in her 50s, gray-haired and tired-looking. You are the one bringing vegetables to Section 7, she said when he introduced himself. Word gets around. I am trying, Thomas said. But it is not sustainable. 4 gardens cannot feed 200 people. No, they cannot. Carol stirred her coffee absently. I have been screaming about this crisis for 6 months. The administration does not care. The station director, Administrator Frost, he is more concerned with Commerce Guild complaints than dying children. Commerce Guild? They run the official food distribution. Refugees are required to purchase rations at subsidized rates. If someone starts giving food away for free, it cuts into their profits. Carol's expression was bitter. Everything is about money even out here. Thomas felt his jaw tighten. So what do we do? You keep doing what you are doing. Keep people alive. Carol leaned forward. And I keep documenting everything. Eventually someone higher up will notice. Or so I hope. That night, Thomas lay in his quarters staring at the ceiling. He thought about Pyrie's thin face. About Jack's careful way of eating, making each bite last. About Kessa's intelligence being wasted in a cargo bay because no one cared enough to check the right box on a form. 4 gardens. 50 people at most. It was not enough. Not nearly enough. But it was something. And Thomas had learned long ago that sometimes something was all you had. You did what you could with what you had and you kept looking for a way to do more. He pulled out his data pad and started making lists. How much could each garden produce? How could they maximize yields? What about expanding the plots? The station had unused growing space in the agricultural dome. It was designated for future commercial development, but it sat empty. Maybe, just maybe, there was a solution here. It would take work. It would take convincing people. It would probably make some powerful people very angry. Thomas smiled grimly in the dark. He had never been good at backing down from difficult problems. Thomas called a meeting in the community garden dome. He sent messages to every registered gardener on the station, 23 people in total. 15 showed up. Some came out of curiosity. Others came because they had heard rumors about what he was doing. They gathered near the main water distribution hub. Thomas stood on a crate so everyone could see him. The group was mixed. Old and young. Some had been on Kepler-9 for years. Others were newer arrivals like him. They all shared one thing in common. They liked growing food. "Thank you for coming," Thomas began. "I know you are all busy. I will keep this quick. There are 200 VRYN refugees starving in Section 7. Not because there is no food on this station, but because of a paperwork error that nobody wants to fix." A few people shifted uncomfortably. A man named Peter spoke up. "That is terrible, but what does it have to do with us? We are gardeners, not politicians." "It has everything to do with us," Thomas said. "VRYN biology can process earth plants. The vegetables we grow have exactly what they need to survive. Right now, 4 of us are sharing our harvests. But 4 gardens cannot feed 200 people. We need more growers. We need to expand." Sarah Price, one of his early allies, stepped forward. "The agricultural dome has 3 empty sections. They have been sitting unused for 2 years. We could request access to expand the community plots." "The Commerce Guild will never approve that," someone said. "They are saving that space for commercial farms. For-profit operations." Thomas had expected this. "Then we do not ask for permission. We just do it." The group erupted in concerned voices. Thomas raised his hands. "Listen to me. Those sections are not being used. The equipment is there. The soil beds are ready. Nobody is losing anything if we plant crops there. We just start growing food and deal with the complaints later." "You will get us all banned from the gardens," Peter said. "Or worse. Administrator Frost does not like rule breakers." "Administrator Frost is letting children starve because of a checkbox on a form," Thomas shot back. "I am not asking anyone to break serious laws. I am suggesting we use empty space to grow food. If that gets me in trouble, so be it." Gregory Walsh, who grew root vegetables, spoke up. "I am in. My plot is producing more than I can use anyway. I can manage a second bed in the empty section." "Me too," Anita Flores said. "But we need to be smart about this. If we are going to feed 200 people long-term, we need better yields. We need to grow more efficiently." That was when Kessa stepped forward. Thomas had brought her to the meeting, hoping she might help explain VRNN dietary needs. She looked nervous in front of so many humans, but she held her data pad with determination. "I can help with that," Kessa said quietly. "On my world we use companion planting techniques. Different crops grown together that help each other. They share nutrients in the soil. Protect each other from pests. The yields are much higher than single crop plots." Several gardeners perked up with interest. Sarah moved closer. "Tell us more." Kessa's nervousness faded as she talked about agriculture. Her fingers danced across her data pad, pulling up images and diagrams. VRYN farming is based on symbiotic relationships. For example, if you plant beans with corn and squash together, the beans fix nitrogen in the soil. The corn provides support for the bean vines to climb. The squash leaves shade the ground and keep moisture in. 3 plants helping each other. You get better yields from all 3. "The Three Sisters method," Gregory said, nodding. "Old earth technique. Native Americans used it. But I thought it only worked with traditional varieties." "It works with many combinations," Kessa said. She was confident now, in her element. "I have been studying earth plants since we arrived. I know which ones would work well together. If you let me help plan the layouts, I can probably triple your current output." The mood in the room shifted. Thomas saw it happening. People were getting interested. Not just in charity but in learning something new. In trying different methods. Gardeners were curious by nature. Over the next hour they made plants. Kessa showed them VRYN soil enrichment techniques. She explained how to layer different types of plants to maximize space and nutrients. The gardeners asked questions, took notes, started sketching plot designs on their data pads. By the end of the meeting, 11 people had committed to expanding into the empty sections. It was not everyone, but it was enough to start. They began work the next day. The empty sections of the agricultural dome were dusty and neglected, But the infrastructure was sound. Automated watering systems, grow lights, climate controls. Everything they needed was already there. Thomas and Gregory cleared debris while Sarah and Anita prepared soil beds. Kessa moved between groups, offering advice and answering questions. Other VRYN started showing up too. Lira came with Jack. Other refugee families sent members to help. They worked together, human and VRYN side by side. The work felt good. Productive. Thomas had forgotten how satisfying it was to build something with his own hands. To see progress happen in real time. On the third day the trouble started. A Commerce Guild representative arrived with 2 station security officers. His name was Morton Blake, and he wore an expensive suit that looked ridiculous in a garden dome. "This expansion is unauthorized," he announced loudly. "You are all trespassing on space allocated for commercial development." Thomas stood up from the bed he was planting. "This space has been empty for 2 years. We are not hurting anyone." "That is not the point," Blake said. His face was red with annoyance. "There are procedures, applications, permits. You cannot just decide to use station resources without approval." "We applied for expansion permits 6 months ago," Sarah said. "They were denied because commercial interests had priority. But no commercial farms have been built. So the space sits empty while people go hungry." Blake's jaw tightened. "That is not my concern. I am here to inform you that all work in this section must cease immediately. If you do not comply, you will lose your gardening privileges entirely." The security officers looked uncomfortable. They were station residents too. They probably knew about the refugee situation. But they had their jobs to do. Thomas made a decision. "No." "Excuse me?" Blake looked shocked. "I said no. We are not stopping." Thomas crossed his arms. "You want to arrest me for growing vegetables? Go ahead. But I am not letting children starve because you want to save empty space for farms that might never be built." One of the security officers, a young woman named Teresa, spoke up quietly. "Sir, maybe we should report this to Administrator Frost and let him decide how to handle it." Blake glared at her. Then at Thomas. Then at the VRYN families watching from the edges of the dome. He clearly had not expected direct defiance. "Fine. This will be reported. And you will all face consequences." He turned and stormed out, the security officers following. After they left, there was a moment of silence. Then Lira started laughing. It was a nervous sound, but genuine. "You humans are very stubborn." "Yeah," Thomas said, grinning despite himself. "We really are." They went back to work. Over the next week, more people joined the project. Word spread through the station about what they were doing. Some residents came to help. Others donated seeds or equipment. A few even donated money to buy supplies. The greenhouses took shape. Row after row of carefully planned companion crops. Beans climbing corn stalks. Leafy greens shading root vegetables. Herbs planted strategically to deter pests. It was beautiful in its efficiency. Kessa worked tirelessly, teaching anyone who would listen. Thomas watched her explain soil chemistry to a retired human engineer. Saw her show a group of children how to properly space seedlings. She was thriving here. They all were. Administrator Frost sent 3 more warnings. Each one threatened legal action. Thomas ignored them all. The Commerce Guild filed formal complaints. Thomas kept planting. The thing about growing food, Thomas realized, was that it was hard to argue against. They were not hurting anyone. They were not taking anything away. They were just growing vegetables. It was such a simple, innocent act that it made all the bureaucratic objections seem petty and cruel. The first new crops were ready to harvest in 2 weeks. Thomas organized a distribution day. The VRYN families came to collect their share. There was enough for everyone. Not luxury meals, but enough to live on. Enough to stay healthy. Thomas stood in the greenhouse watching Pyrie run between the rows of plants. She had energy now. Color in her skin. She was laughing, playing with her brother. Behind them, humans and VRYN worked together, checking irrigation lines and planning the next planting cycle. It was not perfect. Administrator Frost was still making threats. The Commerce Guild was still angry. There would be more fights ahead. But right now, in this moment, they had built something good. Something that mattered. Thomas allowed himself to feel proud of that. Thomas knew the threats from Administrator Frost were getting more serious. The last message had mentioned fines and possible deportation from the station. But what really worried him was the Commerce Guild. They were losing money as more refugees got free food instead of buying their expensive rations. People who lost money had a way of getting dangerous. His friend Jacob worked in station communications. They met for coffee in the main hub cafeteria. Jacob kept his voice low. You need to go public with this. The administration can ignore you. They cannot ignore Earth. What do you mean? Thomas asked. Live stream it. Show people back home what is happening here. Show them the refugee families. Show them the gardens. Show them the paperwork that started this whole mess. Jacob leaned forward. Station Kepler 9 gets funding from colonial authority on Earth. If enough people complain, the money people will pay attention. Thomas thought about it. He had avoided making too much noise, hoping to solve things quietly. But quiet was not working. Can you help me set it up? Already did. Jacob smiled and slid a data chip across the table. Broadcasting equipment is ready in the community hall. Just say when. They did the live stream 2 days later. Thomas set up in front of the greenhouse, with the rows of growing plants visible behind him. Lira stood beside him with Pyrie and Jack. Kessa held a data pad showing the bureaucratic forms that had caused the crisis. A dozen other VRYN families gathered around. Jacob counted down on his fingers. 3, 2, 1. The camera light went green. My name is Thomas Bennett, he began. I am speaking to you from Station Kepler 9 on the frontier. Behind me are 200 VRYN refugees who have been slowly starving for 8 months. Not because there is no food, but because someone checked the wrong box on a form. He held up his data pad showing the intake documents. This box here. Cultural preference instead of biological requirement. One mistake. And because of that mistake, children like Pyrie here have been going hungry while administrators file their complaints into pending review. Lira spoke next, her English halting but clear. We fled a war. Lost our homes. Lost our worlds. We came here hoping for safety. Instead we found a different kind of death. A slower one. A bureaucratic one. Kessa showed the medical reports. The documentation of malnutrition cases. The request for help that went unanswered. Thomas walked the camera through the greenhouse showing the companion planting techniques. The human and VRYN cooperation. The food that was finally feeding hungry families. We did this ourselves, Thomas said. Without permission. Without permits. Because waiting for approval meant watching children die. And we are not going to stop. But we need help. These families need permanent solutions, not temporary gardens. He gave the station designation. The administrator's name. The Commerce Guild's complaints. He laid it all out clearly and simply. The live stream lasted 20 minutes. When it ended, Jacob uploaded it to every major Earth news network and social media platform. The response was immediate and massive. Within hours, the video had millions of views. News organizations picked it up. Politicians on Earth started asking questions. The colonial authorities' communication office was flooded with angry messages. Someone started a crowdfunding campaign for the greenhouse expansion. It raised 50,000 credits in the first day. Administrator Frost sent Thomas a furious message demanding he take down the video. Thomas ignored it. But the Commerce Guild responded differently. It happened 3 nights after the live stream. Thomas got an emergency call from Gregory. Get to the greenhouse. No. Something is wrong. Thomas ran. When he arrived, he found smoke pouring from Section 2. The automated fire suppression system was going, spraying foam everywhere. Gregory and Sarah were pulling plants from the affected beds, trying to save what they could. What happened? Thomas asked, grabbing a container to help. Someone cut the climate control lines, Gregory said grimly. All the heating elements overloaded at once. Started an electrical fire. This was deliberate. They managed to save about half the crops in that section. The rest were ruined. Weeks of work destroyed. Thomas stood in the smoking wreckage feeling a cold anger settle into his chest. Security investigated but found no evidence. No camera footage. No witnesses. But everyone knew who was behind it. The Commerce Guild had made their message clear. Thomas refused to back down. They replanted Section 2 the next day. He posted updates on the livestream channel showing the damage and the rebuilding. More donations poured in. The public was watching now. Then things got worse. Lira showed up at Thomas's quarters at midnight, pounding on his door. Her bioluminescence was flickering wildly, panic making her patterns chaotic. Pyrie. Something is wrong with Pyrie. She cannot breathe right. She is burning up. Thomas grabbed his jacket. Where is she? The shelter. Carol is there but she says Pyrie needs the medical center. Real equipment. But we have no money for treatment. The center requires payment authorization before they will help. Thomas felt ice in his stomach. Take me there. They ran through the corridors to Section 7. Carol was kneeling beside Pyrie on the sleeping mat. The little girl was barely conscious, her skin flushed dark with fever. Her breathing came in short, wheezing gasps. Respiratory infection, Carol said without looking up. Her immune system is compromised from months of malnutrition. She needs antibiotics and oxygen support. She needs it now. Then let us take her to the medical center, Thomas said. They will not treat her without payment clearance. I already called. Station policy. Carol's voice was bitter. I'm just a doctor. I do not have authority to override financial requirements. Thomas looked at Pyrie's small form. At Lyra's terrified face. At Jack clinging to his mother. At Kessa standing frozen with helpless rage. Screw the policy, Thomas said. Carol, can you treat her if we get her to the center? Yes. If we can get past the intake desk. Then let us go. Thomas scooped Pyrie up carefully. She was terribly light. We will figure out the rest later. They made it to the medical center in 5 minutes. The intake nurse, a man named Phillips, stood up from his desk when he saw them. You need to fill out authorization forms before. No, Thomas said flatly. Carol, where is the treatment room? Thomas, you cannot just, Phillips started. Watch me. Thomas walked past the desk. Phillips grabbed his arm. Thomas shook him off. This child needs help. Now, you want to arrest me after? Fine. But she gets treated first. Carol led them to a treatment room. She worked quickly, starting in 4-line, connecting oxygen, administering medication. Thomas stood guard at the door. Phillips had called security. They would be here soon. 2 security officers arrived 10 minutes later. One was Teresa, who had been at the greenhouse before. The other was an older man named Victor. They looked at Thomas, at Carol working over Pyrie, at Lira crying quietly in the corner. We got a call about unauthorized treatment, Victor said slowly. That is right, Thomas said. Arrest me if you want. But let them finish treating her first. Victor and Teresa looked at each other. Teresa spoke quietly. We did not see anything. We will file a report saying the patient was already being treated when we arrived. Medical emergency exception. Victor nodded. Takes us at least an hour to do the paperwork anyway. Lots of forms. They left. Thomas sagged against the wall in relief. Pyrie stabilized over the next 2 hours. The antibiotics worked. Her breathing eased. Color returned to her skin. She would recover. Thomas sat in the waiting area as dawn approached. Carol came out looking exhausted. She will be fine. Needs to stay here for observation, but she is out of danger. Good, Thomas said. Then, what happens now? With the payment issue? Carol smiled tiredly. I am putting it down as emergency indigent care. Let them argue with me about it later. I have been documenting everything anyway. If they want to fire me for saving a child's life, I will make sure everyone knows about it. The next morning, Thomas woke to find his data pad flooded with messages. The story about Pyrie had gotten out somehow. Major Earth news networks were running headlines about a child nearly dying because of payment policies. Politicians were demanding investigations. The Colonial Authority sent an inspection team to Station Kepler 9 3 days later. They interviewed refugees, reviewed the bureaucratic documentation, examined the intake procedures, toured the greenhouses. Administrator Frost tried to defend his handling of the situation. The inspector, a stern woman named Patricia Grant, cut him off. You allowed 200 people to suffer malnutrition for 8 months over a clerical error. You threatened the people trying to fix your mistake. And a child nearly died because your medical center prioritizes payments over treatment. Your employment here is terminated effective immediately. The Commerce Guild representatives were fined heavily for the greenhouse sabotage. The evidence was circumstantial, but the public pressure was too strong to ignore. Patricia Grant called a station-wide meeting. She stood at the podium in the main assembly hall. Effective immediately, all VRNN dietary requirements are reclassified as biological necessities. Full nutritional support will be provided through official channels. The Community Greenhouse Project will receive station funding and official recognition. Thomas stood in the crowd next to Lira and her family. Pyrie held his hand, still weak but smiling. Around them, VRYNN and humans celebrated together. It was not perfect. There would still be struggles. Still be work to do. But they had won something important. They had forced the system to see people as people, not as line items on a budget. Sometimes Thomas thought that was the most important victory of all. The Harvest Festival happened on a clear morning 3 months after Patricia Grant's reforms. Thomas stood in the main greenhouse dome watching dozens of people move through the rows of plants. Humans and VRNN worked side by side, filling baskets with vegetables. The companion planting techniques had worked even better than Kessa predicted. The yields were incredible. Sarah carried a crate of tomatoes past him. "We have enough to feed everyone with surplus left over. Can you believe it?" Thomas smiled. "I am starting to." The festival was Lira's idea. On VRNN Worlds, harvest celebrations were important community events. She wanted to share that tradition here. They set up tables in the community plaza. Families brought dishes made from the harvest. Human recipes and VRNN recipes side by side. The smell of cooking filled the air. Pyrie ran past with a group of children, both human and VRNN. She was healthy now. Full of energy. She had become friends with a human girl named Sophie whose parents worked in engineering. They were teaching each other their languages the way children do. Without effort or self-consciousness. Thomas found himself standing next to the new administrator, Patricia Grant. She had stayed on station to oversee the transition. "You started something important here," she said. "The colonial authority is taking notice." "We just grew some vegetables," Thomas said. Patricia shook her head. "You showed that different species can work together when they focus on practical solutions instead of bureaucratic procedures. That is bigger than vegetables." She pulled out her data pad. "I want to show you something." Kessa applied for an official program designation. Human VRYNN Agricultural Exchange. She has outlined methods, curriculum, expected outcomes. It is remarkably thorough for someone her age. Thomas was not surprised. Kessa had thrown herself into the work with incredible dedication. What does the program do? It formalizes what you all started here. Creates an educational framework. Humans learn VRYNN farming techniques. VRYNN learn Earth agricultural methods. Both species benefit. And it gives the refugees meaningful work and purpose. Patricia looked up from her pad. 3 other stations have already requested to implement similar programs. This could become the model for how we integrate refugees throughout the colonies. Thomas watched Kessa across the plaza. She was explaining something to a group of human farmers, her hands moving expressively as she talked. Gregory and Anita were taking notes. Even now, months into the project, she still had knowledge to share. "She would be good at running something like that," Thomas said. "She already is," Patricia replied. "I am just making it official." The formal announcement came during the festival meal. Patricia stood and called for attention. The crowd quieted. She explained the new program. Named Kessa as the director. There was applause. Kessa looked shocked, then overwhelmed, then deeply proud. Lira was crying happy tears. After the announcement, Thomas found himself sitting with Lira at one of the tables. They ate in comfortable silence for a while. Around them, the festival continued. Music played, someone had brought instruments. Children danced. It felt like a real community celebration. "I have been thinking," Lira said eventually, "about what we can teach you. About VRYNN traditions beyond farming." "I would like that," Thomas said. "On our world we had a custom. When someone saves your family, they become part of that family. Not legally, but in spirit. In bond." Lira looked at him seriously. "You saved my children. You saved all of us, really. I would like to perform the bonding ceremony. If you would accept." Thomas felt unexpectedly emotional. "I would be honored." The ceremony happened that evening as the artificial sun set in the station's sky simulation. It was simple. Lira placed her hand over Thomas's heart. Her bioluminescence pulsed in a specific pattern. Her children did the same one by one. Even little Pyrie standing on a chair to reach. "You are kin now," Lira said. "Family chosen, not born. But no less real." Thomas did not know the proper response, so he just said what he felt. "Thank you. All of you." Kessa stepped forward. In VRYNN tradition, new family members receive a gift. Something to show the bond. She held out a small plant in a pot. "This is a seedling from our homeworld. We saved seeds before we fled. This is a vara plant. It produces blue flowers and edible roots. I want you to have it. To grow here. So a piece of our world lives on Earth's soil." Thomas took the pot carefully. The plant was delicate, its leaves a silvery green. "I will take care of it." "I know you will," Kessa said. "You take care of everything you touch. That is who you are." The weeks that followed fell into a new rhythm. The greenhouses expanded further. The program grew. More stations requested information about their methods. Researchers came to study the companion planting results. Journalists did follow-up stories. The little garden project on Station Kepler 9 had become something bigger than any of them expected. Thomas started teaching classes in the greenhouse. Basic earth agriculture for VRYNN families who wanted to learn. He enjoyed it more than he expected. Watching people discover the satisfaction of growing their own food. Seeing their confidence build. Lira often co-taught with him, sharing VRYNN perspectives. They made a good team. They could anticipate each other's points, fill in gaps in each other's knowledge. The students responded well to their partnership. One morning, Thomas arrived at the greenhouse to find a group of students already there. Not just VRYNN but humans too. Younger colonists who wanted to learn. The program was attracting people who saw farming as a valuable skill in frontier life. Among them was a young human man named Andrew. He approached Thomas nervously. "I wanted to thank you. For what you did. For standing up when it mattered." "You do not need to thank me," Thomas said. "Yes, I do. I was one of the people who did not want to get involved. I thought it was not my problem." Andrew looked ashamed. "I was wrong. Watching you fight for people you barely knew, it made me realize I was being selfish. I want to do better. So I am here to learn. To help." Thomas clasped his shoulder. "Then welcome. There is always more work to do." Over time, the divisions between human and VRYNN sections of the station blurred. Families visited each other. Children played together. People traded recipes and stories. The refugees stopped being refugees and just became residents. Neighbors. 6 months after the harvest festival, Thomas was working in the greenhouse when Pyrie came running up to him. She was carrying something carefully in her hands. "Uncle Thomas, look." She had started calling him uncle after the bonding ceremony. "The Vara plant is flowering." Thomas looked at the small blue flowers blooming on the plant Kessa had given him. They were beautiful, delicate, alien, but growing strong in earth soil. "It is perfect," he said. "Mama says the flowers mean hope," Pyrie said. "Hope for new things growing in new places." "Your mama is very wise." Pyrie beamed. Then she ran off to tell her siblings about the flowers. Thomas stood there for a moment looking at the blue blooms. Around him, the greenhouse hummed with life. Humans and VRYNN working together. Plants from different worlds growing side by side. Different species, different biology, different cultures. But finding ways to help each other thrive. He thought about the night he found Lira stealing vegetables. About how angry he had been at the injustice. About how impossible the problem had seemed. 200 people starving and only a few gardens to feed them. They had solved it. Not perfectly. Not without struggle. But they had found a way. And now something beautiful was growing from that solution. Not just food but community. Understanding. Connection. Kessa appeared beside him. "The colonial authority wants to publish our methods," she said. "Make them available to all frontier stations. They think this could help thousands of refugees across the colonies." "That is good," Thomas said. "It is more than good. It means what we built here matters. It means other people do not have to go through what we went through." She paused. "It means my family's suffering was not meaningless." Thomas looked at her. At this brilliant young woman who had lost her world but found purpose in teaching others. "Your family's suffering should never have happened. But what you built from it. That is extraordinary." They stood together in the greenhouse watching the students work. Human hands and VRYNN hands in the soil. Different but similar. Building something together. Patricia Grant had been right. This was bigger than vegetables. It was about seeing past differences to find common ground. About choosing to help instead of look away. About building bridges between worlds, one garden at a time. The Vara plant's blue flowers swayed gently in the artificial breeze. A piece of a lost world, blooming in new soil. Growing roots in a new home. Thomas smiled. Hope, Lira had said. Hope for new things growing in new places. He looked around the greenhouse at the community they had built, at the future they were planting together. Yes, he thought. That was exactly what this was. Hope, growing strong and bright in the darkness between the stars.